So this is the second time this is happening today, and I'm going to blame it on Chrome because Chrome just froze for me. So, let's try that again. So playing a video with Jenna and the wonderful folks out there. So once again.
Hello and welcome to the AWS On Air show. This is the show where we dive deep with service teams and customers to talk about AWS launches. I am joined today by Simon Lightstone and Philip Fusic, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Awesome. Happy to be here. I'm Simon Lightstone. I'm a product manager at Amazon, a product manager for the Amazon Aurora for Babelfish project.
My name is Philip Fusic. I'm a senior principal software engineer at Tyler Technologies.
Welcome. Thank you both for joining me today. So for those of you who are at home, while this is a pre-recorded session, you are free to ask questions in the chat, and there will be people standing by to help answer your questions. So please, as we're talking today, ask your questions and we'll get those answered for you. So Simon, tell me what has just launched at AWS that you want to talk about today.
Yeah, so it's a recent launch, Babelfish for Aurora Postgres. And what Babelfish lets you do is allow you to run SQL Server queries on Amazon Aurora, right? Now, what that's going to let you do is basically have a much, much shorter path to migrate your apps from SQL Server onto Amazon Aurora Postgres. That also means that now you can use Postgres as your database backend.
Got it. So can you talk a little bit about the benefits that customers can take advantage of for this?
Right. So again, Babelfish is a feature of Amazon Aurora Postgres. So I'm going to show a little bit about what it looks like on the back end.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, before we dive in a bit more, a lot of people probably wonder, hey, okay, I get it. I can run SQL Server queries on Postgres now, but what does that look like? How does that work? So, here's your application. And traditionally, all you had was this Postgres port, right? We can run PL/PG SQL and things like that. You connect. Typically, the default port is 5432. And that was what you had up until now, right? Now what we've done with the Babelfish feature is added this additional port, which understands the SQL Server dialect. It natively understands it. It's not a translation layer or something like that. So now you can connect your application to this new TDS port here, and you can just start running your SQL Server queries, and Aurora will understand that. So it's a feature you have to turn on, which you will show in the demo, and that's basically how it works.
Okay. And then Philip, can you talk a little bit about what benefits you've seen from using this?
Well, with Tyler, we serve state and local government, and we're always trying to enable technology to help our constituents make their communities smarter, safer, and stronger. And since we deal with all levels of government, some of the offices that we deal with are very small, have very limited budgets, so they need as low a cost solution as possible. So for us, that's the key here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, did you have something to say, Simon?
Yeah, I also want to say, that's one reason why we were really excited about Babelfish and why we brought to market. Essentially, Babelfish lets you migrate at your own pace, and then you'll be on these open platforms, the open platform, which is Postgres, and Babelfish is open source, or you can also use it inside Aurora with a few clicks. You can run it on your own server as well. So it gives a lot of flexibility, migrate at your own pace, and of course, you're going to reduce any sort of cost on proprietary licenses.
Yeah, I like that, the migrating at your own pace. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So from a technical standpoint, what if, as I'm migrating, and I have a very large code base and a lot of different queries that need to be converted, how is it possible for me to use both connections at the same time, or do I have to go right to using Babelfish?
Right. Well, you can use both at the same time. So your application, for example, can have one port, one session open on the Postgres port, and also simultaneously a session on the T-SQL port, right, on the connecting to the TDS endpoint. So yes, actually, you can issue queries, simultaneously through both ports, and your application would have to have a separate session open for each, right? Or of course, you don't need to do that. You may want to only from now until the end of time to only continue using the SQL Server dialect. Obviously, we hope people move to Postgres, but fundamentally, it's up to you how much you want to move. You might want to move gradually and slowly rewrite in Postgres over time, or you may want to, largely stay inside the SQL Server dialect.
Okay. And then from in my code, most of what I'm changing is really just instantiating a separate connection. I'm swapping out the connection based off of whatever one that I want to use. Is that correct?
Well, I would say not even so. We natively support the wire protocol of SQL Server, which is TDS. So you don't even need to change your drivers. You will need to refactor your code, right? Because while definitely Babelfish covers a lot of territory and has vast support and things like that, there's going to be a few things that Babelfish might not yet support from T-SQL dialect standpoint. And I'm going to go through that process of actually running a tool that lets you determine that, just to double check. But fundamentally, you don't need to change any of your drivers or anything like that. It just change the server address to point to Babelfish, and you're good to go. Now, on top of that, you're going to want to add a connection to Postgres, right? So you're going to add your Postgres on top of that, and then you're going to start maybe moving over code or adding new features with Postgres.
Okay, got it. And then, so you mentioned there's a way for us to kind of understand better what is supported for our application. What can customers use? There's a tool that customers can use to understand what how Babelfish will actually be able to support their application. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. There's an open source tool called Compass, and I'm going to show that in the demo. So I don't want to spoil the demo. Sure. But it's a very simple command line tool, and I'll show just with one line you can basically take an export of your SQL Server database, a DDL export, or you can export everything. But and then you just run Compass on that, and it generates a very, very detailed report where every single line is scanned, and then it will let you know what is and isn't supported in that particular DDL or application. Okay,
and talk about why something might not be supported.
Right. So there's a few reasons. First of all, there's things like SQL Server Agent, which you'll want to use the AWS equivalent for, and then there's some things which we just don't support today, right? So for example, today we don't support the merge statement, right? So there's Babelfish does support a tremendous amount, even error codes, even things like save points, things that are totally unique to the SQL Server engine we have implemented. But there are going to be a few things there which may not be supported, and that's exactly what the Compass tool is going to let you know about.
Okay, excellent. So, Philip, tell us a little bit about your experience with Babelfish. How has this helped you, and maybe some challenges that you've encountered, and how you've solved those?
Sure. Like Simon was saying, obviously you have a product that you've worked with SQL for a long time. You're going to use features that are outside of maybe, let's say, the standard ANSI SQL dialect. So there may be some things that some different types of things. Like for instance, we use bulk insert, and so for us, when we needed to get data to the database, that part of it we just went ahead and converted over to use a Postgres connection, and and Postgres has a bulk insert type feature. And that is supported by an open source .NET client that can talk through Postgres. So I was able to use it in C# and bulk load data right through that connection. So
okay, good.
But it's been very helpful.
Good. Okay, Simon, it sounds like we have a demo to show. Can you get that ready on your screen? I think now Sounds is good. The time to start looking at how this all works and get our hands dirty.
Sounds good. Should I give a quick overview of what I'm about to demo? I'm ready.
Yes, please. Sure. Yeah,
I'm just going to go through a very basic demo, and it's based just for those who do want to sort of do it themselves, it's based on this loosely based. I added to make it a bit more complicated, but loosely based on this blog post, which you can check out here if you want to follow along. But I'm going to add a few other tidbits along the way. That means we're going to basically show how to deploy Babelfish, how to import a really basic schema, and also we're going to run a compass tool on that schema just so that way you can see the report and get a quick glimpse of how to use the compass tool. So if everyone's ready, I'll jump right in.
Yeah.
Great. So we're just going to go to RDS. I'm logged into the awesome AWS console here. Here we go. And then I'm just going to click create database. Now I'm just going to use standard create, all these options. Click here. I'm going to choose the Postgres compatible edition. And now, one thing I'm going to show is it's just dead simple to enable Babelfish. There's an option here. Now this is blanked out. Why? Because I need to choose at least Postgres version 13.4 or higher. So I'm just going to make sure I choose that. Here under this, I'm going to go to Postgres 13.4. Right. And now if you go, there's this option, turn Babelfish on, and I'm going to check that. Now, we made it very simple. When you do that, it does a lot of things behind the scenes. And if I wanted to, I could actually create my database. Everything is set up for Babelfish. Behind the scenes, it's actually going to create if I use these default options, it will create a new parameter group for me with the Babelfish settings turned on. Right now, if you're an advanced user, of course, you can do more there. Now, I'm going to add a few more tips because often you want to do a few more things if you're just creating a database that you want to play with, right? So one is make sure you configure. I'm going to start at the top and just go linearly. So first of all, so back at the top here, I'm going to go down. Let's just call this something else. I'm going to call it test 01. Let's create a password here. And then as we go on, I'm going to choose something a little larger just for this demo. Another thing I can do here, which you probably would not want to do, but if it's assuming you're building a development machine, which is very common, I don't really need a replica. We're just doing development. And then one very important thing is to enable public access here, assuming that you aren't accessing it through a VPC. Again, for the purpose of this, we're going to want to access it remotely. And then select the VPC security settings, security group here. Now make sure that that's set up to make sure that you can actually connect through your firewall. Otherwise, you won't be able to connect to your server if you don't have your VPC security groups set up. I'm just going to click that, and we're good. Now, I'm going to also go through some additional configuration options here. Again, by default, Babelfish is set up within single database mode and with these settings. Also, again, by default, to make it easy, we're going to create this a new parameter group for you with the Babelfish settings. But if you had it set up before, if you created a parameter group previously, you can choose an existing one. So we're going to start it in single database mode. I'm actually going to go to multi-database mode. The difference here is single database mode, it puts things into a situation where there's a closer one-to-one mapping of schemas and databases. You can read more about it in our docs, but it only allows you to create one database, and multi-database mode will actually allow you to use multiple databases, create multiple databases. However, on the Postgres side, it actually flattens those multiple databases into schemas. And the reason is because in Postgres, it's way, way faster to query across schemas. You can't, it's not really optimal in the Postgres world to query across databases, and this helps guarantee that you're going to get very, very good performance when you're doing cross database queries, right? Because on the Postgres backend, that means it's actually doing a cross schema query. It's mapping them.
Okay.
And that's really it. Also, another big tip here is, you might not want to enable performance insights, especially if your user doesn't have the special access to be able to do that. So I'm going to disable that as well. And now, finally, and I'm going to remove delete protection because, again, we're just using this as a demo. So now I'm going to click create database, and we should be off to the races here.
So it sounds like to enable it, we need to be using Postgres 13.4 or higher.
Yep.
We check the enable button. And then if you have some additional needs for more advanced use cases beyond a development use case, we make sure we have the right VPC and a couple other things that you touched on in the advanced settings.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take a database that I created just before, so that way we can jump right into the next steps.
Yep.
So now the next step is, I'm just going to show a basic SSMS connection, right? So I'm just going to launch SSMS here. SSMS stands for SQL.
Okay. Yep.
It stands for SQL Server Management Studio. That's basically the most common tool that people will be using when they connect to a database.
Okay.
And there's other, a lot of people just use SQL CMD, or there's a few others out there. But, this is probably the tool that people want to take a look at.
Okay.
So I'm just launching this. For some reason, it didn't seem to launch. Let's give it another try. There we go, SQL Server Management Studio. Now, there's a few really important tips when you launch SQL Server Management Studio when you want to get connected, and I'm going to go through them right now as soon as this finishes loading.
One of the things that's important for us is security, and we have some compliance issues, obviously, working with government. And what was really great is that you guys offered this in your GA for the GovCloud, which is important for us.
Yeah, that is good to know.
Awesome. Yeah, it's actually available anywhere where Amazon Aurora is. Anywhere you can find Amazon Aurora in terms of regions, Babelfish is there too. Yeah. So, right. So now here's one thing that users really need to keep in mind. By default, SSMS loads, and it asks you to connect to the Object Explorer, which actually isn't supported by Babelfish at this time. So we're going to click cancel, and it's very important that you click this new query button. So again, make sure that you always, hit cancel when SSMS loads and click new query. Now you're in the query editor. This is what Babelfish supports, and we're just going to, and then all you do is you just enter the server name, and let's see if it's here. Awesome. Let's just use this. So since it actually did spin up, let's try to use the real deal here. Oh, okay. It's actually still creating. So I'm going to I'm just going to use like a previous one, but I'll show you where it normally is here. Just so that way you can see exactly where you'll find all this awesome connection data.
Yeah.
So basically what you're going to do is copy your endpoint, right? And that would be right here. And make sure you use the writer instance, by the way. And then just put that in. And then put your password. And then the username is whatever you have for username, your password. And that's it. Oh. Let me see. I wonder if that one is the one that I had set up. I may have had the wrong password. Let's give that one a shot. I think this is the one that I had created. Just a moment. New query. Awesome. You know what it was? I think I must have, between those, I probably was trying to log in with the object browser. And that's a great example. There's a lot of times when you're using SSMS and it'll pop up the object browser to prompt for login. And, today we don't support the object browser. We do support the new query editor, and therefore, just if ever you get an error message, hit cancel, hit new query, and now you're in the query editor, and now you're ready to roll. So, for example, so now we're in the database, and let's just see what we got here.
So we've got about 30 seconds left.
Of our demo.
Yep. So yeah, so just keep talking through it. And then before we do end, what I do want to ask is how do people actually get started with this? What is your recommendation?
Well, I think it would be what I just did. Go to launch the instance, and then basically it's really simple. You can then deploy it the way that I did, right? And then again, once you're in SSMS here, you're good to go. For example, I'm just going to create a database here, and as you see, I did that. And I don't know if we've got time for this, but I can show importing, a SQL Server schema. So, what are your thoughts? Should we jump in and then just import a basic schema, or?
Yeah, let's try that real quick.
Okay, so I am going to. Just a moment. I'm going to go and start working with schemas now to show a quick import. Great. Actually, it's right here. Okay, so basically, this is a really basic SQL Server DDL, right? And I'm just going to put it right in. And for the sake of time, I don't want to bury the lead. So let's go and just paste this in, and I'm going to show this running. As you can see, this is in the SQL Server syntax, not Postgres. We're going to choose a database. Let's change this to demo. Remember to change that up at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, thanks to SQLServerTutorial.net, which is where I got this. And again, you can check that on the blog post. And as you see, it completed successfully. We've imported all this there. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. How do I know if that's all going to work with Babelfish? Because you want to double check. So here, I'm just going to show super briefly how to use the Compass tool. Now, I have the Compass tool already set up. It's very simple. It's just a very basic Java app that you can download. There's no complicated libraries or class dependencies at all. And then I just use this one line, which is very simple. I'm going to call the command line to run Babelfish Compass. I want to call the report my report, and then I'm just going to put this, which is this is just the file, the DDL that I exported, which the one I just ran actually, which has the SQL Server structure. This replace flag just means that if there's a report that already exists, I want to replace that report. So let's run this and see what the Compass tool tells me about my compatibility.
All right.
Okay,
We are going to. Yeah. Oh, we need to wrap up. So.
Okay, sure. Well, last thing I want to say is you can explore this yourself, but as you can see, there's a very simple layout that a customer can then use to determine if there are any things inside their app which aren't compatible. And that's it. You're up and running.
All right. Well, thank you so much for showing us. Thank you both, Simon and Philip, for joining us today. And we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna and the folks behind Babelfish.